And then the third fundamental would be to have a predictable shot pattern, which would help you to have a dispersion that was tighter and more manageable. That's the function of the swing. I would love to have a discussion with anybody who says stack and tilt is BS or doesn't work, because I'd want to know which part of that they don't agree with, which part of improving contact you not agree with, which part of hitting the ball farther or far enough do you not agree with, which part of controlling the direction or the dispersion do you not agree with, because I would think they would form the uniform kind of foundations for how people want to improve other people's golf. That's what golf teachers want to do.
Yeah, that's what you need: consistency, ball strike, and direction, and as you said, enough distance to play at the level that you're capable.
So there's definitely different ways that you can achieve all three of those fundamentals. You don't have to swing one particular way to do it, but you must make sure, at least the way I think about it, you must make sure that the recommendations you are making for a player are helping them to improve that part of one of those parts of the fundamentals, right? You're trying to directly influence one of those skills. That's what I'm doing.
We are live and very happy to be here with Rob Cheney across the Atlantic. We'll get into that here in a minute. But one of the lead stack and tilt instructors and world-class instructor, to say the least, taught all over the world. So Rob, it's very going to be a great show, have a great conversation. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Pete. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the chat, particularly after what happened at the weekend.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. What happened this weekend? There was a little golf event up in New York, and I don't know what's going on, but as we were talking here just a minute ago, I don't think it's fair to call the Europeans underdogs anymore, since they've just won 14 of the last 20 Ryder Cups. So it seems like it's gone lopsided event again. So I know you're probably grinning or wanting to grin from ear to ear. You're politely holding it back, but what is it that you see that Europe has done to at that level? And you've worked with Tour Pro, you worked with some of the best players in the world, you've been around them. At that level, it's such a small, finite little thing usually that can sway or tip the balance. What do you see that Europe is doing, whether it's a number of those things or is it something that's bigger? I'd just like to get someone from the European side's opinion, because obviously we're over here, we get our opinions all the time.
You know, it's a difficult one to put your finger on. I was relieved, first of all, on Sunday after the way things did play out, and I wasn't expecting us to win Sunday convincingly, but the entire format of the Ryder Cup is such that it's such a fine line between winning and losing. Those matches that went down 18 and on Sunday all went America's way could easily have gone Europeans' way, and the game would have been over very, very, very quickly. I think the one thing that stood out for me all weekend, and I made a comment on someone's post online, was just about the preparation. I feel like the Europeans treat this event more seriously. Luke Donald has done an incredible job, and I think you see that in the way the players speak about him. That's not really to take something away from Keegan Bradley, but 2 weeks before the start, he was not sure if he was even going to be playing. And I think when you just look at the level of prep, the arriving at Bethpage 2 weeks before, the tiny little details that he talks about regarding, the hotel rooms and changing the bed sheets. And I think those are the little tiny details that if someone's treating this like a full-time job, and he used the analogy, I think, of like a CEO type approach to this. You've got the guy at the top and then you've got his teams underneath, and it's managing people, managing an entire unit. And this event has just done that over the last 20 years. I remember watching it as a kid, loving it immensely, loving it as much as I love it now, but it wasn't treated the same way back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we treat it a little more seriously. And I'd heard something on the Golf Channel Sunday evening afterwards about the President's Cup maybe being not being used in a way that it's most effective to help bring in captains and sort of give them the experience before they come to the Ryder Cup, or whether it's pairing up certain pairings and experimenting and using the President's Cup in that format, and whether playing an event like this every year hurts the Americans, whereas the Europeans only still get to play an event like this every 2 years. Few little factors, but ultimately I think I feel like they take it a little bit more seriously. And I don't know why that is. It does seem to mean, I'm not saying, I wouldn't imagine for a second it doesn't mean something to the American players, but you can see what it really means to the Rory McIlroys and the Shane Lowrys and the Justin Roses of this world. Like, it's it's enormous for them, and I think they put it on a higher pedestal comparatively to how most American PGA Tour players would treat it. I'm not sure if that's fair or not, but that's sort of my
Well,
take.
I would agree, and I think Rory got somewhat Americanized. Was it 4 Ryder Cups ago when he said that when he going in, he said he didn't think it was that big a deal, and then at the end, he was so emotional. He said I was completely wrong, and he's done a complete reversal, and now he is the leader. I don't
Uh,
think there's any doubt on who is the leader. I mean, of course, Luke is the captain, but Rory is your team leader.
yeah,
I don't know if America has that. I don't think anyone, even in the Tiger era. I think Phil Mickelson tried to assume that role, but that's something that happens organically. You can't force yourself, I think, into a leadership role. Everyone, it's like a innate thing that people know who the leader is. It's like you're not going to vote on it necessarily. It's just, yeah, that person, we're going to follow them.
yeah, that's true because your best player, the best player in the world, without any doubt, is Scotty Scheffler. And yet, when you watch him in a Ryder Cup, it's hard to see. I'm not again not saying it doesn't mean something to him, but he doesn't show it because he's not that type of player. He's not very emotional. He doesn't show the highs and the lows, and that's one of the things that probably makes him a great player week after
Mm-hmm.
week. But it doesn't lend itself to a patriotic, emotional crowd that want to see a bit of fist pumping and jumping up and down. I think of all the people in your team right now, the one that seems to fit that mold the most would be Bryson. Um, and he's yeah, I think he's probably the one that you could lean on and say, he's a bit of a character that could be that person. But I don't know. It's an intangible. I didn't expect us to be as far ahead coming into Sunday. I felt like this Ryder Cup was going to be extremely close, and I had the Americans as favourites just because of the home advantage. Proved me wrong. I wasn't really expecting us to win, and for us to play as well as we did surprised me um, in a good way. But I, I don't I don't know what the future holds for the event. I'm kind of glad that the Americans came back so close on Sunday and made it a bit more interesting. I think it could have been viewed as a very sort of lame, tame event if we'd have gone and got 19, 20 points and it
Uh-huh.
had been all over. So I kind of think that's a good thing. And I do feel like the post-mortem of what I've listened to online and on some podcasts already is, yeah, America have got to change their approach to this if they want to compete and make this a serious thing again. So let's see what they do. I enjoyed it. I was surprised we won. I'm pleased we won, and I'm already looking forward to 2 years time.
Yes, people always ask me, who do you think is going to win? I said, look, obviously, growing up and being from the U.S., I hope the U.S. wins. But it has changed so much since I started watching the Ryder Cup in the mid '80s and to the late '80s and all through the '90s. I mean, it's like a grudge match. They didn't like each other. It seemed like most matches went to the 18th hole and somebody would make a mistake. They would cave in the pressure, which is understandable given how intense that pressure is. I mean, you can't expect anybody. Bernard Longer comes to mind, 4-footer to win the entire thing. I don't know if I want to see somebody have to go through that. I mean, it's obviously high drama, and while you're in it, yeah, it's great to watch. But to put someone that could make or break somebody's entire career. And the anguish that they would go through if they miss that putt is probably astronomical that not many people could understand. I always hope that it's close, like Sunday was. It comes down. It's very exciting to watch. One side's on the edge of their seat, ready to fall off in a good way. One's on ready to fall off in a bad way, and it's just like I'd like to see it closer for the event and for both sides that can now start enjoying it more instead of just bashing their own team. Because if you look at most of the scores over the last number of years, it has been very lopsided. Whoever won, obviously Europe's won more, but when the U.S. has won, it's been a little lopsided, and that's not really fun for anybody except the people on that team.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was a good hour and a half on Sunday evening our time. Though it was getting quite late into the night. I'm sitting there with my wife, and we're like, this might not go our way. Like there was a moment or two where I was starting to worry. And just clinging on to the hope that one of those matches could just grab a half. So it became extremely exciting from that perspective, not necessarily enjoyable at the time, but I think it made the event, it was good for the event that the Americans came back. They played great. I think they played very well. And as they seem to do, they seem to it always feels to me like they are the stronger in the individual Sunday, the singles, and the Europeans, not that they always win the pairs, but that partnership and playing with they seem to pair up better.
Yeah, the analytics with is it who does it for them? The Italian guy.
Eduardo Molinari.
Yes, he seems to be a genius at that stuff, and America's got to find his counterpart. I think to bring it back, from being over here and just reading the things online and listening to, like, Paul Azeringer's been out quite a bit in the last couple of weeks talking, and I'm very surprised that they have not tapped on him more based off what he did at that Ryder Cup, where he had I think it was the redneck group, it was Boo Weekley and JB Holmes, I think Kenny Perry. I mean, he had people paired off their personalities, and it seemed to work wonderfully. But from what he says, that they haven't really asked him to give input. Hey, what do you think, or contribute? Which is very odd. The Europeans seem to do that fantastically.
Yeah, I think that's really what I was getting at when I said that preparation. Like there's a continuity to it all, and there's a direction that someone is saying, these are we're using what we've learned, and we're kind of collaborating and putting this together and trying to do better. That point was made on the Golf Channel as well. I was listening to the post-mortem on Sunday evening, and Paul McGinley speaking from a European standpoint, how they used the Seve Trophy and that sort of additional event to really help drive everything towards Ryder Cup success. And Brandel was talking about, Johnson Wagner came on, and he was saying how there was a large disconnect between some of the past captains, to your point, Azinger, who did a wonderful job at Hazeltine, and then he's almost disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
And recent past captains who are nowhere to be seen. Jim Furyk's about the only one that was involved recently and is still involved. I mean, Stricker's nowhere to be seen. Zach Johnson's nowhere to be seen. Paul Azinger. I mean, it's strange. So I feel like there's a lack of direction and clarity in terms of how they want it done. And the reality is it's simply not enough for them to turn up anymore and win because they're the better team, which used to be how it was many years ago. You're always much stronger, and that's just not true anymore. So there's more to it. And I mean, I'm happy with one again, but I also like the competition. It's no fun if just one team dominates forever. So I imagine America will come back very strong, and what both teams are going to look like in 2 years again is anybody's guess. I think the fact that the European team was so close to the team in Rome was truly another very valuable thing, because the entire group basically the same, and there must have been so much continuity and just seamless transition to doing everything again, and everyone being comfortable in those relationships that go on behind the scenes. So I think that helped us a lot as well. Be interesting to see what the team looks like in 2 years, because it could be very different. It could be very different.
Well, let's get into your golf coaching and swing theory and things like that. But to kick that off, I want to get into your history, because it's very I don't say it's very unique, but it is unique in that you have been all over the world. I find it very cool, very interesting, and unique in a very good way, because kind of somewhat envious. But and just doing the homework on, believe you're in Portugal for about 6 years. You're in Singapore for about 6 years. Not to get off topic, but I guess the first question that comes to mind is, how did you talk your missus into moving halfway around the world multiple times, usually every few years?
Yeah, wasn't too difficult. The first time moving from London or the UK, we weren't quite in London, but in the south of the UK to the south of Portugal. I mean, the south of Portugal is a golfing sort of mecca, if you like, of Europe, especially from a weather standpoint. Spain and Portugal very close to each other. Southern Spain, southern Portugal, very warm climate, beautiful place to play golf, beautiful place to live, beaches, sunshine all year round, just a really pleasant spot. So that was quite an easy move to want to make from that standpoint. And I'd always enjoyed going there in terms of just leisure travel, playing golf there. I knew the area quite well. I was still in the relatively early stages of my teaching career, but I just wasn't. I'd done a lot in the UK up to that point. I'd opened up sort of multiple driving range facilities and had been running academies, which at that time was just employing or having multiple coaches working with me. And I kind of just got burnt out with that side of it. And I wasn't really teaching as much as I wanted to. And I was losing the sort of love for that side of it. So this was a reset. This was, my daughter was young at the time. It was a good time to move. She went to school there, learned to speak the language. We had a very pleasant few years there. I really feel like that was where I started to really hone my craft. I was teaching on a grass driving range. People would come and see me. We were on holiday, or they would be local, and I just taught a lot of lessons. And I really felt like that was where I put the hard yards in, and taught just golf every single day, and got hopefully better and better at it. And during that time, I would bring people out. Andy Plummer and Mike Bennett came to visit me a couple of times, more than a couple of times in Portugal. I put together a few little coach groups as well. Like I brought out some other coaches who spoke about short game and putting and different things. So I started to form and forge a bit of a community there in terms of getting coaches together, which I enjoyed, because that coach education thing was something that I felt like I had benefited so much from, that it felt right to want to just do that. It felt good to say to people, look, I'm going to put on these events, come down and learn if you're interested. So we started to do a bit of that. And then that was working fine. I just ultimately reached a point there where the club I was working at wasn't really interested in bigger plans that I had for the place. I wanted a bit more. I wanted to develop the practice facility, and it just wasn't really on the cards. It's one thing you realize when you live in that country. It's they don't do things very quickly. It's sort of,
No, I've been to Spain. They don't do.
yeah.
It's like, we'll get to it in a little while or
And so
tomorrow.
I was butting my head against the wall for a while there, and I was reaching a point, and we'd been there a while. 6 years was a decent stint, and I was certainly looking for the next thing to do, and the next step in my career. And it was at that time I saw a job advertised for Golf Tech in Hong Kong. And I knew a few people inside Golf Tech quite well. Nick Clearwater's a friend of mine, and Nick's the vice president of instruction, and he's got a strong history with stack and tilt. I understood some of the crossover between using a tour average system that Golf Tech were using with their 3D motion measurement, and a model that I use in my teaching. And there'd clearly been a move towards systematic modeled coaching, which is certainly what I would subscribe to. So knowing Nick and knowing about Golf Tech, I made a few phone calls and very quickly got asked to come over and learn a bit more about the role. That started out as a job in Hong Kong, as I just mentioned, and then ultimately they needed somebody to manage their Singapore facility. So Hong Kong became Singapore, and a coach role became a manager role immediately, where I went into a center that was, it's fair to say, was underperforming at the time. It was relatively new and just wasn't doing particularly well. And over the course of 4 or 5 years, built a team of outstanding coaches, absolute, grade A teachers, who I'm very proud of, and feel like we built something there that was exceptional. We became the number one Golf Tech center in the world. We taught over 20,000 lessons in just one center. We grew to the point where we were able to open an additional facility inside the same city. And we went from having 5 coaches in Singapore when I joined to having 13 at one point, so we sort of doubled the workforce. It was a proven model of a good business model, giving coaches a system and a procedure to follow, both from a teaching standpoint primarily, and then also just from a business standpoint. I think the role taught me more about that side of the business more than it did the teaching side, but I learned a lot about people, human resources, hiring and firing, setting targets, expectations, managing grievances, things that you don't always think you're going to do as a golf teacher. Right? I found it a very valuable experience, because it was really my first entry into the corporate world, having always up until that point just been my own boss, teaching golf lessons. And I usually describe it, as eating what I kill. It was up to me if I went to work. It was up to me how long I worked for, and that had always been the way it had been from day one. And this 5 or 6 years in Singapore really opened my eyes to a bit more of corporate work and how that looks is extremely valuable, and we're grateful for the experience.
Yeah, that's very cool. And then you went from Singapore back. You were in the U.S. for a while, weren't you? Or were you just kind of going back and forth?
Yeah, back and forth. I currently am sort of making 2 or 3 trips there a year to the US, but I'm based in London again
Okay.
now. Through some personal circumstances, family circumstances, it was time to come back, and it's been great. Funny enough, today's the day, 30th September 2024 was the day I landed back, actually. So I've been back exactly 1 year today.
Very cool. You had gotten into golf early and you had gotten into teaching early, if I'm not mistaken. Right around 16, you kind of dedicated yourself to the golf industry and was helping people. But was there a compelling moment that you knew that this was going to be your path, or did it just kind of happen and there wasn't a click, a moment that clicked? And I asked Andrew Rice, and I said, Andrew, what drives your passion? He goes, well, I just enjoy teaching. I don't necessarily have a passion for it because, Andrews does photography and he likes wine, and Andrew's got a lot of awesome things that he does. So he didn't have that. And I'm not knocking Andrew. I'm just saying, that we're all different. But I'm always interested that for some people, especially that have reached a very high level, was there a compelling moment, or was it just like, you went, what you did, what was in front of you, you did the best you could, and pretty soon you look back after 20 years and you're like, holy shit, look at all this stuff that accomplishments and everything else.
More the latter, to be fair. I think when I started teaching, that was off the back of a very short, unimpressive sort of playing attempt and trying to make some money playing this game. And I think it's a similar path for a lot of golf coaches. Certainly the ones I speak to, they do their PGA qualification, they try and play golf a little bit and play the mini tours or whatever that looks like, and then most people are not going to make very much money doing that, so they then fall back into teaching as almost it's the safety net that you have, having been qualified and done your training. And that was really my path. And then I realized that if I'm going to teach, I think I just have the characteristic within me that if I'm going to do something, I want to be good at it. I want to do it well. And I didn't feel comfortable taking money from people and then not being able to help them. And so that's really the catalyst for me to get more interested and involved in coaching and learning more about how the swing worked, was the fact that I didn't really know how the swing worked, and I was trying to make my living teaching golf, so those things didn't align for me, and that needed to change. And so I was very lucky, I think, to just be geographically close to a guy by the name of James Ridyard, who's now very prolific on tour teaching short game. I'm sure he was at the Ryder Cup this week with Justin Rose.
Mm-hmm.
James was hugely influential in my journey of introducing me to stack and tilt and introducing me to Andy Plummer and Mike Bennett. And it was just, as I mentioned, a geographical coincidence. He lived very close to where I did and practiced and came and hit balls at the driving range that I would teach at. So it's one of those moments where you just collide with somebody that maybe wouldn't happen in in another universe, right? That the reason that we really came to speak to each other and have a relationship was because we just happened to be in the same place. I'm grateful for that, because that was I don't know if it's sliding doors moment or not, but it's just a moment of being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right person at the right time, and then taking that opportunity and grasping it with both hands, which is what I felt I did. Once I'd got a little sniff of stack and tilt and how that could help my teaching, I really took it upon myself to make sure I was around James as much as possible, Andy and Mike as much as possible, attending the trainings, going out of my way to just listen, read up, and spend time with those people that I felt could influence my teaching in a positive way. So that was my introduction to it. And that was how my coaching journey sort of went from just starting out needing to teach to make a living and then wanting to teach better. And as I learned more, I think your results improve, and hopefully that's when your business improves as well.
As I look at the stack and tilt history from beginning to progression, and there was a lot of uh, friction that they had to go through early on. And I think in large part, as we discussed a little bit earlier, the original Golf Digest article probably didn't do it any favors, or do the coaching industry favors. It set it off on the wrong path, pushed it off on the wrong path to begin with. But as you if you look at the history of the swing, let's say, or the coaching models over the years, you have just call it the Hogan through up until the Nicholas era. So the 70s, it was very head stay stable, center pivot is what it's referred to mostly today. And then you got into the 80s, and it was swayed more towards a to use a interesting word, it was more of a sway or a move off the ball. I think that was the predominant thought process, like a Jimmy Ballard, because you had Hal Sutton playing well, Rocco Mediate playing, Curtis Strange. Obviously, Curtis is number one in the world, and he had that move. And then you had the kind of I call it the Ledbetter was the hybrid. It was kind of a somewhat of a combination of both. And then we transitioned back with stack and tilts part of it, along in a parallel to all the technology that we have to measure these things now, to say that, hey, maybe you don't want to do this too much, or at least the perception to the general public or our students was, well, they say get behind the ball, so I got to really have a lateral motion in it and move everything over the right side. So it's like timing in life is one of the most critical things. You can come along and have the best product and best everything, but if the public's not ready for it, it's just going to crash and burn. TiVo would be a prime example of that. People didn't trust it, but it just seems like, although again, you guys has a lot of kickback in the beginning, I think, because it went against the common thought process, especially at the time. But this trajectory has somewhat paralleled, and as well as the life cycle of coaching and the swing in general, it's come back to where stack and tilt is not the anti-establishment teaching as much as it might have been thought to be. But and that's all leading to a question: is do you see a particular reason why stack and tilt seems to be, I'll just say attacked, or maybe not attacked anymore. Maybe it might have been attack would have been a better word years ago, but seems to be such a controversial system.
Everybody's your friend until you put pen to paper, like until you write something down. And one of the criticisms that is thrown at the system is, well, there's thousands of different ways to swing. And the response I would give to that is, yes, there is. Why don't you just write down one of them? Why don't you just start somewhere? You have to start with a swing to perform a motion and predict a ball flight. I mean, there's a structure to this that just gets lost in terms of just making recommendations on swing more to the left, swing more to the right. I mean, you could do more of anything or you could do less of anything, but without having a clear system or model in your mind of what should happen, you can't fully understand what the consequence of doing too much or too little of something would be. So I think the criticism starts out because people think it's one way to swing. And because it's one way to swing, that flies in the face of what people believe to be we're all individual and therefore just go out and do your own thing. So that's part of it. I think the fact that it's branded and has a name that isn't, although it's Andy Plummer really at the core of it, it isn't attacking David Ledbetter specifically, or it isn't attacking Butch Harmon specifically. It's not Butch Harmon's swing, or it's not Andy Plummer's swing. You're not personally attacking the individual, you're attacking the brand or the name of the swing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that plays a role as well. People don't feel like they're being mean to a person, they're being more critical of a brand. So I think those are two of the things. I also take your point that when it came out, it went against the grain of what was currently on vogue in terms of teaching, shifting or resisting, turning into the trail side.
Yes, resisting was the big one that I never understood. That one, I say,
Keeping the trail leg.
Yes.
Sorry, keeping the trail knee flexed was certainly a big part of Ledbetter's teaching. And so it went against the grain. And then you've got this entire industry of people who are trying to fight for relatively small space, I guess, in some ways. This industry is full of people trying to get their head above the ground to be recognized and seen. And therefore, if you've been teaching in a particular way and then someone comes along and says you've been doing it wrong, there's going to be pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you recognize at some stage that actually these guys might know what they're talking about, there's an element of not wanting to admit that in some ways because it somewhat maybe discredits what you've been teaching up to a point. So it requires a lot of reflection to be honest with yourself and say, is what I'm teaching the right thing, or am I using the right terminology? Am I doing it correctly? And unless you're in a position where you're comfortable saying, do you know what, I think I've got this wrong and I need to change tact, on certain things. I'm not necessarily saying everything, throw the kitchen sink out, but you may need to change your opinion on some things, and that requires a level of reflection and admitting you might have been wrong that a lot of people aren't prepared to do either. So what's your alternative? You've got to push back, and you see it in every walk of life. The voice that's the loudest is often the one that's believed to be true. So there's that back and forth now still that exists. But I think my overall observation would be that, if I'm 15 years into this and watching how things evolve, the fingerprints of stack and tilt are everywhere. If you just open your eyes and pay attention, you can see that. If you want to choose to argue with that, that's fine. I don't have the time or the energy to want to argue with people um, anymore. I don't think there's that argument. The three-dimensional description of the swing is clear. We have 3D now that people can use on their phones. The way that Andy and Mike described the movement of the spine is agreed across the board now. I don't think that's up to date. So there's so much of it that's been um, verified, I should say. That means it's still current. It's still being talked about. And if the principles didn't work, and if it was as much of a scam as people would like to make out, then it wouldn't exist anymore. It just wouldn't be around. So I think it was ultimately, in the first instance, it was people pushing back against something that might have affected them and their livelihoods. And then since then, it's one of those things, unfortunately, it's just stuck a bit, that it doesn't work, or it doesn't work for the driver, or there's just things out there that you hear um, that just simply aren't true. But as I say, if you look at the tour players who are using it, and you look at just what it really is, if you take the time to just learn a little bit about the system, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have that point of view.
The what would you say would be some of the biggest misconceptions about stack and tilt?
I think one I hear a lot is you can't hit the driver with it. That's one I hear a reasonable amount. I mean, I get people posting on my YouTube channel questions.
Hmm.
That one comes up. I think that's a misunderstanding of how the weight forward part of the swing works, meaning that it's really the lower body that translates towards the target in the downswing, the pelvic sway or the hip sway that exists in the iron swing and the driver swing. But it's the lower body moving forward that shallows the angle of attack, which means you can definitely hit driver with it. And I'd say it actually makes hitting driver easier. So that's a common one, because when people think about putting their weight forward, putting it on their lead side, they often overdo that piece. They do it to an exaggerated extent, and they often also do it with their upper body leaning towards the target, which is not something we would ever prescribe. And so it's a misunderstanding of the weight forward. And then if you put your upper body ahead of your lower body, all things being equal, that's going to make your delivery of the club quite steep, which may help you hit down on a wedge and take a divot after the ball and make you experience that sort of ball first, ground second contact that you maybe would never have experienced before. So you're like, I'm going to go try stack and tilt. I'm going to put all my weight on my front foot. You hit a few wedges where you take these deep divots and you catch the ball first and think you're doing it correctly. And then you try and do that with the driver and you fail miserably. So that's a common one, I would say. Overall, I think the most common misconception about it is it's one swing. And it's not one swing at all. It is a model swing reference for hitting a particular shot. And then from that baseline model, you can use any of the parts and any of the elements to create any shot and any swing pattern you would ever want to create. So it's using the model as the baseline to have an expectation of what the ball should have done. And then when you see that the pattern has deviated, the swing that you're watching is deviated from the model, you also have an expectation for what that ball's going to do. So you very quickly are able to identify the deficiency and repair it. And you can't do that without having a very clear understanding of what the function of the swing is and how the anatomy, the limbs, the joints, and the club need to move in order to produce a particular type of shot. So that's how my mind works. It's very systematic. I think, contrary to popular belief, or contrary to the wider public's belief about golf, good shots are created in very specific ways. It's not as random as people think. I use this for sometimes in lessons. I say to people who slice, I said, you didn't fall out of the womb a slicer, right? You weren't born a slicer. You slice because the face is open to the path, okay? And I draw because my face is close to the path. It's very specific. It's not it's
It's
not
not
by luck.
debatable. It's like this is the reason.
Yeah.
Here's the everyone agrees this is the reason.
So I'm setting up with the face close to the shaft or close to the path. And if I conserve that geometry, the ball's going to curve from right to left. It's an expectation I have. And if I set someone up with a draw alignment and they hit the ball and the ball push slices, I need to know where the swing broke down. I need to be able to see where it broke down and be able to communicate to somebody, hey, look, you see on the downswing, you open the face with the wrist, and we need to identify that's the piece, and then we need to work on it. So we're using a very systematic approach to repairing a deficient machine, if you like. Um, and there's a very clear answer to every question. It's not random and it's not debatable. Good shots are produced in very specific ways. Bad shots are produced in very specific ways. And so when you start to recognize that, there becomes a much narrower pathway for you to go down to be able to find the answer. It's not just random. It's not just, I'm just going to keep trying until I hit a good one. And the real problem with golf is that you can hit a good shot with a very bad swing. You can produce an outcome that looks functional. And so that leads people, when they see the outcome, they see the ball on the screen or they see the ball fly through the air, and it's relatively close to what they wanted to see. It's relatively close to the outcome that they wanted. They attach a belief that what they just did was relatively close to what they need to keep doing again and again and again to produce that. Truth be told, most of the time that one good shot in amongst 10 to 20 bad shots is that's the anomaly. That's the one that should never have existed. And the other 19 are the true reflection of the inadequacy of the swing. So that's what I try to communicate to people. If you understand that there's a very strict kind of set of rules and there's a very clear reason why shots happen, you can very quickly identify where you made a mistake and therefore very quickly get yourself back on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think it should be. I don't think golfers should wake up every day, walk to the course, and wonder which swing they're going to bring with them on the day. I think there should be a much greater ability to start where you left off.
Yeah, a foundation. I would probably turn that. I like how Andy and then how he instilled and I'm assuming teaches in the classes and you've learned it and everybody that teaches stack and tilt describes it as you have to have a system and you just went through that very well. From me myself, I'll give you my perception of it. I look at the system that it's required, that it's like the bone structure of the body, as you mentioned, the joints. And how do these things move? Here's what this is what we know from decades and centuries of anatomy and biomechanics. Here's how we know that things move, and this is how the body works, and this is how the physics plays a role in that, face to path, etc. Where I have some deviation from the stack and tilt theory is that there are so you have your bone system. Obviously the body has, I believe, it's 7 systems, the neurological system, the circulatory, et cetera. But now once you start getting into soft tissue, muscles, tendons, ligaments, fascia, as it starts to move, and I think your club, I'll be 53 on Thursday, so I'm getting up there. So I'm starting to have a better understanding of how my age, old injuries, fascia, moving musculature, and it moves the structure of your body, plays a role in your swing. So I sometimes struggle, especially with the injuries I've had, I will struggle to fit into a system. So I sit there and look at the golf swing and I say, I get the stack and tilt system. That makes total sense to me. But how does somebody, whether they had an injury, let's say they were in a car wreck and they had something happened to their pelvis or their lumbar spine or their whatever it is, they've got a problem. And they can't quite now their system, their system or their structure is modified and or the soft tissue is modified to some degree that plays a role and a variable in that. How does stack and tilt work with that? And this is where I think I said earlier, why I think some of the people who are newer to stack and tilt, and this was the discussion Dennis and I had, seem to be more, well, it doesn't matter. You have to fit in this because this is what physics says and this is what anatomy says. But it seems like the more experienced instructors say, no, we can use this system in different, in slight modifications to get a desired result. And from what I hear you saying, I think we're somewhat saying close to the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I wanted to ask you that question based off my perspective of it.
I think it's a really good question, because I think that's the largest misconception when you're saying the stack and tilt system. The way that I would sort of just slightly reword that is, I think that's where people try to say that everyone's taught the model. Everyone's
Hmm.
taught you must do it this way. P1 needs to look like this. P2 needs to look like this. P3 needs to look like the positions, and the exact swing needs to look exactly like a model. And that's a misrepresentation, certainly, of how I teach. And I would say it's a misrepresentation of the system in general. The system is what allows you to take take the knowledge of the swing, the joints, anatomy, the impact alignments, the things that you need to do, and modify things. If somebody, isn't able to get the external rotation in the trail shoulder to get the depth they need at P4 to hit to swing on a plane that you'd want them to and hit a standard push draw, you could align things differently to help them hit a pull fade.
Hmm.
You could pull their trail foot back at setup and help them to have a little bit more of a capacity to get the depth that you're looking for them to have. There's many, many, many different modifications that you could make, and I don't think you can make any of those unless you have a very strong understanding of the baseline model that gives you the flexibility to then move. In fact, the way I look at it often is, I don't know who's really saying we only teach one swing, but some people might be saying that. I feel like the lessons I give are very different. The person gets the lesson that I feel they need based on their deficiency of the three fundamentals. I can talk to you a little bit about that. That's really how I assess a swing, whether I'm looking at a big tournament professional or anybody in between. My assessment is the same. My assessment of how they perform the three fundamentals. And if you have that baseline of assessment, you can then identify, in my world, very quickly where the most deficient area for that golfer is. And then that helps you to prioritize the recommendation that you make for them. So that's really that's the art of using a system to help you identify what you need to do with a student. I honestly think most golf coaches have this in their mind. I believe that strongly, even though they might not be able to write it down. They might not want to say what it is. They might not want to put pen to paper and put their, sign their name and say, this is what I do. But there's no doubt in my mind they must have a system to some extent, because if you didn't have a system, how would you ever make a recommendation? If the ball's slicing to the right, and you've got a golf instructor in front of you, you ask the question, well, what are you going to do? Why is the ball slicing to the right? The face is open to the path. Okay, so what are you going to do? Well, how are you going to close the face to the path? You've got different choices. You could change the grip. You could change the shaft face to path relationship at setup. You could change the wrists. You could do different things. I'm not saying any of those would be necessarily right or wrong, but you'd need to make a decision. And you could only make that decision if you had some sense of what the swing was supposed to do to restore its function. I think the golfers, so there's golf teachers out there that I see teaching everybody the same thing, like everybody, the same drill over and over and over
Right.
again. And that strikes me more as a model or a cookie cutter type coach than somebody who has a broad understanding of the swing, a detailed, understanding of the swing that can then bring that understanding to the individual in front of them and pick the piece that's most appropriate. So that's really the way I see your question about trying to, do we try to fit everybody into the same mold? I definitely don't do that. That isn't what the system is, but because it's written down and how to hit these checkpoints to hit this stock shot, they can sometimes be misconstrued like that. But I
Yeah,
think that's
and I think that's in the bigger picture of the argument, the anti-stack and tilt, or where arguments got very heated in the past, and maybe even so today. I don't know if those discussions. I'm sure there's a few people. I won't mention. They've been on the show, and I know that they're not stack and tilt fans. And I know that there are people in y'all's system that don't get along with these people, and that's fine. But I think continuing the discussion like we're having here and giving people and I don't. People have accused me. Some of them have said, "Well, you're trying to play the middle." I said, "I'm not trying to play the middle. I just see the benefits of both systems." Again, as we talked earlier, at specific points in time, and having a structure is a good thing. If you have your own structure that's different from stack and tilt, you can articulate it well and you can make it make sense. By all means, use it. But at some point, you might have to implement some of their ideas to, because that's what somebody needs. You can't just say, well, that's a bullshit system. I don't agree with it, so I'm not ever going to use it. Well, that's just putting your students at a disadvantage of if they want to get better in a certain way.
Yeah, I
And,
agree. When you look at, 15 years ago, the idea of having a model swing was very much frowned upon. Like, that's not the way we do it. Fast forward to today, everyone's using this sports box AI or similar. What are they using to make their recommendations on pelvic sway or torso rotation or shoulder tilt? What are they using to get green numbers, yellow numbers, and red numbers? What are they using? They're using a model. They're using a baseline model of how good players perform the swing. And whether I'll die on this hill. There's more similar. The good swings are more similar than they are different. I will die on that hill. But the idea that just because all the swings look slightly different means that there's no rules is one that I would push back on strongly, because I think it's that approach to the golf instruction, or that presentation of golf instruction to the masses. And I'm not saying there's anybody specifically doing that, but there are people posting that, those pictures at P4 of, Matt Kuchar and Jim Furyk and Shane Lowry somewhere in the middle, and saying swing your swing. That presentation of improving your golf to the masses and suggesting that you can just keep doing whatever you want and ultimately it'll work out because we're all as unique as a snowflake is nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is trying to break through that nonsense and helping to educate the people who come my way in a way that helps them to play better golf. I mean, that's really my motivation.
I mean, you look at this podcast. It's called 360 because it deals with everything and it has to do with golf. I mean, I've had Marine colonels, I've had golf coaches, I've had CEOs, head pros, men, women, you name it. And I get flack from the other side. You know, when I posted your stuff, I got some note. Well, why are you having stack and tilt guys on there? They're full of shit. And this, hey, because the conversation needs to continue. And what you're saying is we're the message, or what some people perceive stack and tilt, that everyone has to swing this way and that's it, it is not correct. And that's one thing I wanted to get across, because in talking to, I'll tell you where I came to want to learn more about stack and tilt, because I found myself getting on the negative side in following the stack and tilt pages and things online. I'll tell you where I saw that. And where I saw that was week to week, the page would post usually the winner's swing. And they would say, look at this is stack and tilt. Now, my initial reaction to that, going back a year or 2, 3 years ago, whatever it was these guys are crazy, because Scotty doesn't swing like Rory. Rory doesn't swing like Shane Lowry. And as you said, you got all these swings. But then I got to thinking, hey, don't fall into the common groupthink of being against this system. Maybe there's a different message there. And that's when I reached out to Hank, and I got Andy's book and I got the DVD, and I said, I need to learn more about this before I make a statement. I mean, I don't have a massive following, but I got thousands of people that listen to each episode. I said, I can't go out there and just be the norm and just say, well, they all say that everyone swings the same and they do this. So when I learned more about it, this was my perspective that yes, there is a pivot around a point. Now, whether someone has a little bit more of a lateral, 1.8 inches versus 0.9 inches. Okay. Do they both have a lateral? Yes. One has more, one has less. No problem. So what I got to thinking, and I think Hank confirmed it for me, was those posts on the stack and tilt page aren't saying all these guys swing the same. They're saying there are parts of the swing that resemble one another, and there are common denominators that happen in all swings. At least that's what I came to learn after diving a little deeper into the stack and tilt method. Am I on the right track? Am I off base?
I would say you're on the right track. More good swings are more similar than different. The movement of the lower body, the pelvic sway through impact and into the follow through. You could look at Scotty Scheffler as a good example of someone who does that a lot. But that's a movement that good players demonstrate more than the poorest players. I'm teaching golfers of every level, and if I see the highest handicap slicer they're not moving their lower body forward sufficiently. They don't understand that motion of the pelvis. Whereas if you put all of the swings from the weekend alongside one another, you could make that picture at P8 in the follow through, where the arms or shafts parallel to the ground, arms parallel to the ground in the follow through, and you could screenshot those pictures, and you could start to see commonalities there that could help you certainly as a golf instructor, could help you to train your eye and categorize swings in certain ways. That was really what I learned the most, actually, learning stack and tilt, and really, what does that mean? That was really, I was taught how to study the swing. I was taught what to look for. Like one of the exercises we were given in the early days, I remember Andy, he does the presentation. What you can learn in a day is always going to be limited, right? You can't just turn up for a training on anything and really understand the subject, right? The amount of information that you get on that first day is overwhelming. But I remember the training, or the follow-up, was go back and take your last 10 lessons, or pick the last 10 people who slice, right? Pick 10 people who slice, and then put them in a category at P5 where their left arm's parallel to the ground in the downswing, and put them next to each other. And then put the next 5 players who hook and do the same picture, and start to recognize that it's the eye training that taught me the most about studying the swing and how you can understand the cause and effect of movements and what to expect to happen to the ball. Because ultimately, the ball is the judge. The ball is the thing that we should be making our assessment on. We shouldn't just be looking at a swing. It never fails to amaze me when swings get posted on these forums anywhere online. Like, critique my swing. I can't critique your swing unless I
That's
know
why I've never done that.
unless what shot you're trying to hit.
Yes.
The alignments for a fade and a pull fade are going to be different for the alignments I want to see for a push draw. So until you tell me what you tried to do with the ball, or until you tell me what the ball did, I can't really make much of an assessment about your swing, because where it looks at any point in time is going to be relevant to what the ball did. So the way that people should think about their assessment of their own golf swing is, how do they perform the 3 fundamentals? Number 1, contact. How predictable is their contact, both on a vertical standpoint, so high and low? So do they hit the top of the ball, or do they hit the ground before the ball, or do they hit the ball first and the ground second? That's a low point discussion. I think a lot of people are familiar with that concept, because that skill is demonstrated by the best players with a very strong correlation. As handicaps increase, people's ability to demonstrate that skill with any degree of consistency decreases.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very strong correlation there. So a tall player effectively never hits the ball fat or thin. And when they do, it's such a wild mistake that it gets highlighted by the commentators, right? So they hit the ball.
They replay it over and over again.
Yeah. That makes them that's the start point of what makes them a good player. So how can you start assessing golfers at different skill levels? The first thing would be their ability to make consistent contact. And then when you understand the pieces of the swing that affect contact, you can begin to put together a tool of assessment to say, well, how well is this player managing their weight location? Because the location of your weight plays a role, not an all-encompassing role, but it plays a role in where the bottom of the swing is going to be. And that's the very basic foundation and principle of stack and tilt. Why would putting all your weight on your front leg be better than putting all your weight on your back leg as a broad kind of ends of the spectrum? Well, if I wanted to hit the ball first and the ground second, having my weight forward in front of the ball would at the very basic level help me to do that. So contact, how do you do contact? Distance, how far do you hit the ball? I could design a swing that had the contact under perfect control. Think about a chipping swing, right? I could put my weight on my lead side. That's an interesting discussion as well. Like when people are taught to chip, where do they put their weight? Most people will tell me they put it on their lead leg. Why do they do that? To encourage the downward hit to get the strike. So there's another conversation. But the chipping swing is not functional as a golf swing because it doesn't hit the ball far enough. I'm not capable of shortening or reducing the golf course length so I can hit the par 5s in 3, the par 4s in 2, and the par 3s in 1. So I now need a swing that I can make long enough and fast enough whilst still controlling the contact to make me functional. So now the swing has two functions: contact and distance. Distance meaning far enough, not as far as you possibly can, because that's a different swing altogether. If I was
Yes.
trying to hit the ball as far as I possibly could, I'd design a different swing. So contact and distance control. And then the third fundamental would be to have a predictable shot pattern, which would help you to have a dispersion that was tighter and more manageable. That's the function of the swing. I would love to have a discussion with anybody who says stack and tilt is BS or doesn't work, because I'd want to know which part of that they don't agree with, which part of improving contact you not agree with, which part of hitting the ball farther or far enough do you not agree with, and which part of controlling the direction or the dispersion do you not agree with? Because I would think they would form the uniform kind of foundations for how people want to improve other people's golf. That's what golf teachers want to
Yeah,
do.
that's what you need: consistency, ball strike, and direction, and as you said, enough distance to play at the level that you're capable.
So there's definitely different ways that you can achieve all three of those fundamentals. You don't have to swing one particular way to do it, but you must make sure, at least the way I think about it, you must make sure that the recommendations you are making for a player are helping them to improve that part of one of those parts of the fundamentals, right? You're trying to directly influence one of those skills. That's what I'm doing. I'm not telling you to put your weight more forward because stack and tilt says put your weight forward. I'm not telling you to have the shaft leaning slightly forward when you hit the ball because Rory McIlroy does it or because Scotty Scheffler does it. I'm doing it because it has a direct influence on improving one of those pieces, primarily the contact in that example. But that's where the detachment from just making random swing recommendations goes away, and it's very much directed at the individual in front of you with a very specific purpose. Why am I making this recommendation? What is the expectation on the contact, the distance, or the direction? And when the player demonstrates the recommendation that you make, what's the outcome? Did it do what we thought it was going to do? That's what should happen. That's what should happen.
Here, where I go, where I told you that story where I was saying stack and tilt, that these guys they're posting the different swings and they're trying to say the same, but part of my continuation of learning process, because I mean, the more you know, the more you realize, holy shit, I thought I was smart at one time, I didn't know anything. Because you got going down these different avenues, going down different doors, and you're like, wow. So I've modified my own thinking, and how do I incorporate these things? Because stack and tilt has been very successful at all levels, and other theories, I'll just call them for the time being, I'll just park that right there for lack of a better term, have had success as well. And I started looking at them, and in conjunction with me reading up on stack and tilt, I had E.A. Tischler on the show, and I had read Mike Adams' book. So and they have some of their biomechanics system, I think, is very good. I've talked to E.A. obviously on the show. I've spent some time with him up in Chicago. I haven't spent any time with Mike, so I don't know his as well. I know E.A.'s is very in depth, and seeing the illustration of how the differences of people biomechanically, their grips, hand position, there's a window. I believe he calls it a continuum. So you always fall into these parameters, and within those parameters, you have this continuum that people can be at one extreme or they can be at the other. And I think that he said, because we discussed stack and tilt, because again, that's when I was reading up on your guys' info. And for him, he said, look, I have in his system, I have a number of people who measure out to where they have a lower anchor on the left side. Some people that he measures in his system have an anchor in the middle. Some people have an anchor off the right side for a right-handed golfer. And I got to looking at that, and I'm looking and I'm like, stack and tilt has been successful. His system has been successful. How do these things match? And that's where I started to see if somebody is a right anchor, lower body right anchor, upper body can have somewhat of a modified anchor from the lower. I think it does as we tilt away from the target. But I started seeing that the as you mentioned earlier, the swing path, the arc thing, all those things would be deviated from the baseline, or what would be middle of the ground. It would, and then but the fundamentals and principles would still happen, maybe in a little bit of different direction, but then it would always be to hit the ball based on, you want to hit a slight fade, you want to hit straight, you want to hit a slight draw. All those things would still apply. And that's for me when it clicked, like, okay, you can have varying degrees of larger systems, a system based off physics, a system based off biomechanics, system based off the body, but they all have these similarities to where there is a pivot around the spine. There is pressure shifts, but it doesn't body doesn't move. And I'm looking at all these things, and I started to see, at least in my own mind, that the similarities started highlighting themselves to me, and I'm like, wow, all these things might be different on the surface, but as you dig into them, they all have these overlapping similarities. And I would hope that part of this discussion, and I hope to have Andy on at some point, and maybe is Manavian. I always call him Manavian. I've heard it. I don't know his first name, Michael. Hopefully, at some point I'll have
Yeah.
him on as well. I know he's deeply passionate, and I've seen some of the old chats and stuff. But hopefully that these overlapping things is what people can start to see. Maybe I might be full of shit and I'm not, I'm just seeing something that's not there, but I don't think so. I think I'm onto something where some of these discussions won't be so polar opposites where people can start to see, yes, their system fits within this system and vice versa. Not 100%. I don't think it'll ever be 100%.
There's maybe if we really were all sat down around a table and having this discussion, openly, you'd find there's more common ground than
Yes, that's what I'm finding on this show, on polar opposites of anything.
I have a hard time. I don't know enough about the biomechanics system that you referred to. I've seen certain things online. I'm not educated enough on it to know all of the intricacies of it, so I can't make too clear of a comment on it. All I would say is the rear post versus front post discussion. If you're a rear poster, that comes with certain connotations that you have to account for through the swing and impact alignments, right? We're talking about hitting the ball, and having your weight back is not really demonstrated, certainly at impact, by any good player.
Not at all, and that's why I said it's the post on the backswing, but it does, the pressure and everything does shift towards, in that case, it would be the middle instead of going from to the front.
I would never, and that would make I suppose that goes down the route of the argument. If I had a player in front of me who moved off the ball, let's call it, moved off the ball in the backswing, but performed the first fundamental with a degree of consistency that was very acceptable, meaning they hit the ball solid, I'm not going to go change that because it doesn't look right or it doesn't fit my preference. I think that's, again, maybe where some coaches might do that, or that might be something we would get accused of doing. I can only speak for myself and say I wouldn't do that because I'm not basing the swing on how it looks. And I'm not making an assessment on the swing on how it looks. I'm making an assessment on what the ball's doing. And a golfer's ability to perform or not perform the three fundamentals. It comes back to that as the standard. And if you that's why I said, if I've got a beginner in front of me who's missing the ball, they don't make contact, I can use that tiered approach of assessing their ball flight as they're not passing fundamental number one. They can't even make contact. That lesson's going to look very different to a tour player I've got in here who's hitting it 290 and overdrawing every driver and missing 5 out of 6 fairways left. That's a different lesson. He's got the contact, he's got the distance, but he hasn't got the third fundamental. So that lesson looks very different. So it's only by having that sort of starting point where you can assess that. Now, if you tell me you're a rear post golfer and you are successful with performing the three fundamentals, that's absolutely fine. If you tell me you're a rear post golfer and you shift off the ball and you hit fat and thin and you can't control low point, I'm not going to let you be a rear post golfer. The argument in my head is if you're a rear post golfer and that's what your DNA says, then that's it. You're done for. I think that's ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
That argument doesn't stick with me. Like, I can train myself to swing around my front leg or my back leg. I can do both. And you could too, with the right instruction, you spent enough time practicing. So are people more predetermined to doing something based on their body structure? Probably. There's probably like restrictions and emotions that are easier for some people to do than others. But I don't agree that if someone's a rear poster, they shift off the ball, they stay on their back foot, they hit behind the ball. I'm not going to let that person.
No. I think that's where some of the people who might, let's use that rear post example where they're saying they need to shift into that. Where I have seen where it works is if you could imagine a front poster. Let's take the stack and tilt model. That the line, and we'll use a right-handed golfer because we're both right-handed, so it's easy for us to understand. If you're left-handed, I'm sorry, but Rob and I are both right-handed, so we're going to go with right-handed golfers. Um, that if you took a line, drew it up from the center of the ankle to the middle point of the head on the right and the left leg, that the on the for a front post, that the angle from the right leg to the center of the head would be the longer of the two. Does that make sense? If you have yeah, if you have a center pivot, they would be equal isosceles, and if you have a rear pivot person, the line from the left leg up to the top of the head or center of the head will be longer, but the pivot itself would still be. It's very similar. It's just pivoting around a different point, meaning the ball position on a rear post in that system would not be forward to center. It would actually be back of center. So that the pivot is still around the spine. The axis that it swivels on is around the right hip, but it's still moving in a very similar fashion to a left pivot. It's just we're shifting where the pivot is. We're not having a lateral motion, so it's still a center spine pivot without lateral motion that has an anchor point around the right leg. So I start to see, but it's a discussion that can continue. I would hope very. I have a lot of respect for you guys.
I
So
would, I would love, I would love that discussion, like a round table, 3 or 4 people on a podcast like this, and being able to communicate in real time what versus having that back and forth rather than it having to be presented like I'm doing today, and then some people might push back on a couple of things and then they get their chance down the road. And those conversations being had in real time are where I think we make the most progress, because you can either very quickly sort of ascertain where the disagreement is, and quite oftentimes you can realize that, oh, we're kind of saying the same thing but we're saying it differently or something like that. So that would be something that would be very, very interesting to me. And I don't know how much of a rear post constitutes a rear post. I mean, how much of a move around that trail side is considered acceptable, like, because I would have a very particular amount. I think that's what helps my teaching, is to be super clear on what I would consider to be a range that's acceptable. And again, it fits within what people do to perform the 3 fundamentals. So I've seen enough swings to know that someone shifting their pelvis 3 inches away from the target
yeah, I don't. I'm not.
isn't going to work. So
I think that's fallen from anybody who says that. I think is really out in the field from every perspective of coaching theory. I think if someone's saying you got to move off the ball 3-4 inches, like, yeah, you're out of this conversation now. We've disproved that.
And I think the empirical evidence is very clear. You could look at pictures of modern players and even players from years gone by. It doesn't happen. And those models I was talking about earlier, where you've got the AI 3D stuff on your phone now,
Mm-hmm.
where you can swing, they're not recommending a pelvic sway at the top of the backswing of anything. It's basically a 0-inch sway. It's a centered pivot as a model, as a baseline. Of course, there are certain people who can get away with or do move. And again, I don't mind a little bit of movement. Like it's not going to kill the swing if you can still perform the 3 fundamentals. So yeah, I think if you really got into the weeds and we had these conversations, maybe they wouldn't be that exciting, because we'd all go, "Oh yeah, I was saying the same thing." But
I'd love to do it, and I've been trying to do it. I think the history of our profession, in particular in the last, let's say, 15 years, with the Alpha War, and then now there's the chipping disagreements. And I were you at Open Forum a year and a half ago? Not this, but when they did the short game presentation.
just this year, I wasn't there the year before.
So I think that, and I think Nick and Michael do a great job. I've gotten to know them, I think, fairly well. I was messaging Nick the other day. But I think that the history of things getting too heated has limited people's uh, ability or desire to go on to something else and do it. But I would hope that my podcast, because I'm approaching 200 episodes now, and again, I've had across the spectrum of different people with different theories. I would hope that, and we'd have to pick the right people. I would, someone who could articulate it well, and they're not going to get. It would not go down the heated direction. It would go, oh yeah, you're right. How does that work with this? So there would be a true effort to understand, and maybe there's debate or differences, and we work through those. But I would love to have that in the swing, in the short game. nutrition, I would never go down that. Those people are, if you think golf coaches are go at you, see the nutrition people, they're really, really passionate, and then they go very deep, and that argument will never be won. But yeah, I would like to hopefully do that. And I'm working towards that. I hope. It's just
Well,
getting the guys and girls to commit to say, yeah, I need somebody to come on and we'll do it. It's just getting the people to say, hey, you know, my show, we're going to do it very respectfully. I have respect for both you guys and girls.
yeah,
Let's give it a shot.
I would be more than up for that. I think having those discussions can only help to move everyone forward in just a better understanding of a subject that they maybe don't have and that's me learning about, a different angle to come at this from, and me hopefully sharing something valuable that helps someone go, actually, the way they say that is, it does make sense after maybe misunderstanding something. The the the, the real kind of I always just keep coming back to, as long as you're helping someone do those three fundamentals better,
Mm-hmm.
you can generally measure that now with the contact quality, the low point location, the distance someone's either hitting it or the speed they're swinging at. There's metrics. I've got TrackMan behind me. There's metrics that you can measure and use to see if someone's performance is measurably better or measurably worse. And so, from a student's perspective, someone watching this wondering how to think about their improvement, I think one of the things I really try to do is educate my students in the beginning on those three fundamentals, because during a learning process of practicing and playing and hitting balls, you're going to experience good shots and bad shots, but you want to start to get a little bit better at categorizing those and not just saying, oh, that was a bad shot. And if you're at the range, just raking another ball in and trying again and raking another ball, rather being a little bit more aware of, that was thin. I hit that ball thin. The club didn't strike the ground. I hit low on the face. The launch angle was low. That felt, there was vibration through my hand. It didn't feel very good. That's thin. And if you do that again, that's thin. That's two in a row now. You start to teach people to recognize their pattern, because, again, going back to the shots being created in very specific ways, if you just think you hit a bunch of bad shots and then a few good ones, you don't know where to go when you hit a bad shot because you can't
Mm-hmm.
categorize. It's not, it goes to, Andy uses the analogy that I've sort of stuck with me over the years, is that golfers are like toddlers, or even not even toddlers, babies. They can't communicate. They just cry. Like he goes, man, bad shot.
Yeah. What do you want to do at your game? Well, I want to be more consistent. Okay. What does that mean?
So I have a take on that I'm really working towards. I think that's the one that comes up more than any other. I want to be more consistent.
Yes.
And I think what people really need to be is they need more control. Golfers are never taught to control the forces of the swing. The forces of the swing that are acting on the body and acting on the club throughout the swing, primarily, let's talk about through impact, where it really matters and when those forces are the greatest. There's no lesson out there that I see clearly communicating to golfers how to control the forces, how to control how your body and the club move through space when the forces are acting upon it. And that goes back to me saying that, any swing can hit a good shot. I could flail away at this thing on the ground here. I could pick up a club and make any swing. And if I did it enough times, I might hit a good shot. But that's not me controlling the forces. Therefore, I'll never be consistent. So I align those two things very closely together. The inconsistency stems from a lack of control. And you've never really been taught how to control those forces. Therefore, you've never practiced in a way that allows you to do so.
You don't have a purpose. There's no purpose of the practice.
No, I'm just hitting the ball, and if I hit a good shot, I sort of pat myself on the back. That was a good shot. And I do it again, I pat myself on the back. That's a good shot. And then the third one, I hit it on the toe and it curves to the right. I'm like, well, I didn't really know why I did that. But because I'm at the driving range, I can just pull another ball in and I can try again. And there's in my mind, there's the incorrect assessment there of just thinking, if I do it enough times, it will stick. Like if I just go through the reps enough times, I'll find something that will work. And I would say that's not a very efficient way to do it, and likely not a very successful way to do it. So control the forces and teach people to control the forces of the swing is really where I think that leads them to a point where they have control of their game. The control element is what they're looking for, and they call that consistency.
Hmm. I'd agree. As far as we were talking about the possibility of getting a roundtable with a lot of very smart people, where I see the game is right now, uh, is we have all these now that in the tech era, we have all these ways to measure. So we have these giant mountains or silos of data. And it's now, I think the next level of the coaching industry is like, okay, how do we identify, again, as we went back to the fundamental in the beginning that we started talking about? I don't know if it was in a pre-show, it's been a while now, or if it was an early part of this episode, but how do we identify what's the medicine that someone needs for the ailment that they have at a given point in time? And then how is that put together so that it is implemented, and then that they can not only hear it, but they can understand it? Because how many times, like, our students come to us and we're the experts, and whatever we say, they're going to shake their head. Yes, you're right. But does it really sink in? So the coaching world, how to take what's needed, or determine what's needed, give it to them so that it cures the problem, and then they can advance and everybody can be happy. And I think with all this information now, that the fringe arguments, or the very, very heated, hopefully, are now no longer, because we have enough data to say, look, this is, we all agree on this. Yes. Okay. Now, what are the intricacies based off different individuals? Or let's group individuals to tour pros, single digit handicap, high handicap, and then, we can do it that way, and then we can break it down even tighter. I think those discussions are what needs to happen going forward. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right about the volume of data now that we can measure so much. The intricacies of the wrist, 3D of the body, pressure plates on the ground, TrackMan's measuring what the ball's doing, what the
mhm.
club's doing. There's a lot of data out there. Implementing that data in a way that's effective for the golfer in front of you is becoming more of a skill in itself, really, because you've got to take all that data and extrapolate out of it very quickly the one or two things that you might be able to communicate to somebody in a short space of time. Um, that also opens the pathway, I guess, to people working on too many things, which is definitely a lot of golfers, right? I mean, I've got a YouTube channel that gets a lot of eyeballs on it, and I know from the people watching my YouTube that they're watching other people's YouTube, right? They're all over the internet looking for help,
They're looking for that fix.
and that's the nature of the beast. And I would, I would say that, if I'm being honest, my honest assessment of what I've learned about golfers and golf coaching, I'd say that once they really know what they need to do, they do not understand how long they need to do it for before they make progress with it. I made a comment in a recent YouTube video that golfers, people in general, but golfers overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year.
Yeah.
And, you know, the model of golf coaching, which has been, hour-long lessons, sort of weekly, come in, go practice, come in, go practice. That model's more for the benefit of the coach and the recurring revenue model. It's not necessarily for the benefit of the student, because they could just really go away and do the same drill for 6 months and just do that one drill. And if it's the right drill, they'll get better. So I think people look for the next thing to do prematurely because we're not that good at sticking with just the one thing.
Right. Especially in today's society with the social media, the dopamine hits that everyone's getting, has gotten addicted to. They're scrolling needlessly, and they just sitting there, what the hell am I doing? And they're looking for that next thing. And golf falls right into that, where they, how many of us get the student that comes in and says, well, I got a club championship or the city championship or whatever in 2 weeks. I need, or next week, I need you to fix me. Well, that's a Band-Aid, it's not getting to the root of the problem, and getting you really where you need to go.
Can I just go to the bathroom?
Yeah, of course.
I'll be back. Thank you. I needed some more water as well. So it's funny how much talking makes your mouth dry.
About how much longer? Yeah, about 10 more minutes? Just so I know it. Okay.
Yeah, we're good for 10 or so. I can go a little bit longer if you need to.
Okay. All right. So, as we have with these long form podcasts, Mother Nature comes a calling sometimes in the middle of the show. So we are back, back with Rob Cheney, talking golf swing and theory and everything else about golf. We're solving the world's golf problems as it relates to coaching. With This is one question along the lines of what we've been discussing that I'm very curious to hear, in particular the higher level coaches that have been doing it a long time. As we have all this technology and we know all these sciences, we've got physics, we have applied physics, and by applied physics, I always relate it to the movement of the club in space, and changing things and center of gravity and shafts and all those things. So we have applied physics. Um, we have, let's say, biomechanics. We have biology. We have geometry. We have all these different sciences. And I'm very curious to hear each coach's opinion on how they determine which science takes precedence for any particular individual.
Question. Hey, my area of expertise, I would say, is more in the geometry first and foremost, and then a little bit in the biology and the anatomy. I've studied that quite a lot, so it's my it's my belief that you can change a lot of that pattern just by knowing where to put the club or the body in space at a particular time. And so I'm coming at it more from that angle rather than some of the biomechanics and I would say I come at it more from that angle. Um, I know where things need to be from an anatomical and a club position throughout the time and space of the swing. So changing those movements or changing those positions via different body motions or different forces of the golfers applying to the club or to themselves or to the ground, like doing it that way around is the way I see the most the value, and what's what I've studied the most, I've used the most, and I've seen the most success with, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And geometry has been, I've only asked that question now to about three coaches, I think. And geometry has been 1A or 1B in each answer. And even the people I've asked that I haven't had on yet that we've discussed it briefly, as they would, geometry is way up there. So it's kind of interesting that the common denominator is so far has been geometry. But I don't think there's a right or wrong. I just like to hear what different people
Well, I
ideas are.
think one of the things that you mentioned earlier about the overwhelming amount of data we can have now and all the things we can measure doesn't necessarily get us to a better outcome. And in my mind, I mean, if I've just have the only tool I really must have, excuse me, the only tool that I must have at my disposal for my lessons really is a camera. I don't need TrackMan. Um, I use it indoors. I don't use it when I'm outdoors usually. I want my camera. Like going back to the eye training and the studying of the swing that I've done over the years, there are things that are going to happen based on the picture of the swing at any point in time. You can see all these 3D things that are out there now, and having 6 years of teaching at Golf Tech with 3D motion on every single lesson, you learn to see 3D and enough of 3D. You learn to see the three-dimensional
Hmm.
motions 2D. You see it face on, and you can make a pretty good guess at torso rotation and sways and things. You can get pretty close if you trained your eyes enough. So again, 3D, don't really need it at all. The camera is the king as far as I'm concerned, and that's, I think, also stops the overwhelming data that you could have as well. Like if you're studying the swing and someone wants the deepest possible answers, yeah, put them on gears and get every single number that they might possibly want. But that doesn't really necessarily mean that that lesson's going to be more valuable if someone's still able to pick up on the right piece to work on. So the data's good, but the camera's the most important thing. And I would probably say to you, in my mind, if there's one thing amateur golfers could do that they overwhelmingly do not do right now that would help them, it would be to learn to film their swings when they practice and use that camera feedback based on the lessons that they've been having to determine if they're moving in the right direction or not. So they're using the video feedback, which is accessible now to everybody with a smartphone, right? Like, film your swing, learn what to look for at the one or two places in the swing where your coach has highlighted
Hmm.
this to change, and go and work on it. And that's the pain point for most people, is it's too much effort to set up a camera. It's too much effort to hit record. It's too much effort to walk back to the phone every time and scroll and watch yourself doing it. That's really where the disconnect between lessons, coaching, and people's improvement is lacking in my mind. And I think we're at a point in time where it's obviously never been easier to do that. It's never been easier or more accessible to be able to film your swing. And if I could educate the masses on one thing, it would be learn to film your swing and then learn what to look for your swing, for your individual swing, not everybody else, just the bit that you need to pay attention to. I
I
think
would agree. When TrackMan was really coming to prominence, I I was tagged as, well, you're anti-science, you're anti-TrackMan. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I just don't think, because everyone was saying how it's going to, it's for everybody, it's going to completely change the game. And I think it has changed the game. It's allowed us to see specific detail. So I don't want anyone out there to try to troll and say, well, Pete said that TrackMan wasn't good. No, I think it's phenomenal. But I had explained it at that time as a very high-end MRI machine. You know, you and I can go to MRI. We're not orthopedics. We could, then we look at the data. It's like, well, what do we do with it? So yeah, it can give the best information possible. But if you don't know how to read it, and I agree that there's I think sometimes there's an over reliance on technology, and having coaches on this show of the highest level. Anyone can just look through the list that I've had on here, and many of them who are deemed to be heavy tech people have said on they come on, we've discussed this. How often do you use tech? And they say, well, I'll use it often in the beginning of the lesson to see where they are, put it away. I'll use my skills to get them where I think they need to be. And then we will check towards the end to see how much of a change has happened. They're not sitting there every swing. Oh, you're four down, or you're 6.1. Not that, they're not doing that in every swing. And I think that's where some of the young teachers or coaches have misconceptions. There's a lot of discussion we've had today is on misconceptions and people getting things twisted. So I'm with you that if you have a camera, you want to keep it simple and make some progress. Focus on some things. Do those things until you can do it, until you don't get it wrong, not just until you get it right. I think that the bombardment of tech for people who don't understand it and get lost in a rabbit hole, it can be detrimental and has shown to be detrimental.
without a shadow of a doubt. I do. I've definitely seen that. Yeah, people who come on the socials and ask questions and are down a rabbit hole of tech and don't really know where to go. And that's, I guess, that comes with the territory of there being so much information out there for people to really get their hands on. And a lot of people are that way inclined, right? As golfers, they want to almost have all of those things to work on. We've got some kind of psychos in our midst. I certainly think, the style of coaching that I have, and my YouTube channel speaks to this. I see the comments, and people that like my channel and subscribe and watch, they enjoy the detail and the clarity of the discussion. And that's a different discussion to how some other people would present the information, which is absolutely fine. So I think I attract that type of golfer when I get online lessons come through. The people who've been watching the channel, they're looking for that level of detail that maybe haven't been exposed to
Yeah,
previously, or
you're
some.
very good at that, and you're consistent with it. It's like that is your thing that you're very, very good at. It's like you're almost like your superpower, that your messaging on those things is, uh, even if someone were your biggest detractor, that they would have to agree that, yes, Rob goes into very good, very simplistic detail so that the listener or viewer can understand it very well.
I appreciate that comment. It's really my goal to be authentic and consistent with the content, because if it's not, and that's where the systems help me so much, is that I can stand by the information and say the same thing this week or this month as I said last year, and it's still the same message, because the place where that thinking has come from is the same. It's not, random or changing all the time. So I appreciate that. And really, that is the goal for the channel, to keep trying to present information that can help people and that is simple but clear on what to do, and that points people in the direction of improving contact, distance, or direction, and
Yeah, I think you're
help.
doing a very good job. You want to wrap up with some emergency 9 questions, and I can get you on to enjoying your afternoon?
Let's do it.
All right. As I tell everybody, the first one, the last one, everybody just about on the show has gotten. The ones in between, we kind of mix and match just to keep it interesting. So obviously with the Ryder Cup just ending, walk-up songs have become a very big thing. If you were going to select your walk-up song in Ireland, let's say that you Mondayed into an event and you won it, and you made the Ryder Cup team for Ireland, what would your walk-up song be?
Oh my god, oh my goodness. We Will Rock You, Queen.
Very, very UK, very UK selection there.
Yeah, I think
But
that one would work quite well on the first tee at the Ryder Cup. I mean,
yeah.
it reminded me of the one um they tried to get that clap going this week, which didn't quite work.
Let's see. So Hollywood calls you and said, Rob, we followed your career. We're very impressed, and we're going to make a movie about your life, and we're going to let you and or your wife pick the actor that plays you. Who are you going to have him cast in that role?
The one that pops into, I mean, the person who sometimes people say I look a little bit like is Matt Kuchar. So I might get a golfer to play my and we've got a similar
Yeah, we've
hairstyle.
all got that follically challenge. I'm right there with you. We go to the same barber, everybody. So Rob and I actually met at the barber shop in Orlando at the PGA show, and then that's how we set this up. I give myself I go to myself as a barber every week and give myself a $20 tip or every month. So that works out pretty good. If you could give a lesson to any historical figure throughout history or today, who would it be?
My goodness, that's a really good question. I Anybody at all? They don't have to be famous.
No, you can do it whoever you want.
I mean, I would love and this is a little personal, but I don't mind sharing it. My dad's been quite sick for a number of years, and he got me into golf when I was a junior and a kid, and I was 9, 10 years old, and as I became better at the game, he got sick and has been unable to play for a number of years. I'd love an opportunity for us to play together and to give him a lesson. I think. Plus, he was a terrible goal. Like when he played, he was a terrible. He spliced the ball. He was like in the hundreds, and I know, like with a very high level of certainty, that I could really help his golf. I remember how bad he used to be. I remember we did play together when I was younger, and I got to the point where I even beat him before like he stopped playing. And I think I would love to help him. And that would be the most precious lesson I could ever give.
I don't think anyone would argue with that one. I think most coaches would probably say the same. That's a very good answer. Your favorite purchase in the last year under $1,000 can be a training aid, a course, a household item, something that one of your hobbies or something you're passionate about that you've bought in the last year. Always curious to hear what high achievers in the golf industry are spending their money on.
It's another good question. Um,
200 shows. I'd like to think that finally getting somewhat decent at this thing with some good questions.
yeah, it's caught me on the hop a little bit. Let me think. Uh, Things that have made my life a little bit easier. Probably the it's slightly related to work, but the thing that I carry around with me and I use all the time are these little portable microphones, which have just been like an absolute godsend and changed how quickly I can just plug into my iPad and do a lesson, or plug into my phone, film a quick video. And for less than $100, they were like, these things are really, really impressive. So that's so good. In fact, I got a spare set just in case, like, I break the first set.
Yes.
Because that's been good. Really, I spend most of my money on work-related stuff or golf-related stuff. I like going to the gym as another thing that I do in my spare time, but I think I work, golf, gym, that cycle of things, and then yeah, I think the microphone or something related to the cameras and the filming. As I do more YouTube, I learn more about all the little intricacies of that. And
Yes.
maybe you would have a similar experience doing pods and having all the right equipment. When you start out doing YouTube, you just have an iPhone and you're shouting from the other side of the room, and you realize all the lighting and all the tripods and all the lenses. I bought a lens actually for my camera, which isn't that far away. Like this thing,
Mm-hmm.
like make sure I can fit the wide lens in on the front view, and there's never enough space. So
It's amazing what we can do on our own now, isn't it? That used to have to have a Hollywood camera crew. Now we can go on local shop or Amazon and buy all this stuff we need.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very fun.
Well,
Couple simple ones. What to you? What is worse, a well done steak or iron covers?
iron covers is worse, I guess.
That's everyone said that. Now this might I haven't played in the UK, so I don't know if it's a thing over there. But obviously, going to the turn in the States at the halfway point and getting something to eat or drink is a big fun thing. Hot dogs over here, as you might well know, are very popular at the turn. So if you're over here and you're playing golf and you go to the turn, what is your go-to condiment on your hot dog?
Mustard,
Very
definitely.
simple. Very,
I
there we
like
go.
sweet a bit of, if I had a choice of multiple, it'd be mustard and ketchup mixed with some, you have those like nice like sprinkle of onions, those dried
Yes,
onions,
diced onions.
very good. Yeah, you definitely do the food game on the golf course so much better than we do over it. I love playing golf. I love
Sometimes
playing golf.
too much. Some of these groups will sit there for 20 minutes, say, "Hey, let's go."
Yeah. I was there in I was there a couple of times this year. The first trip in January, I had a couple of weeks in and around Florida and traveled around. And the amount of, played a bit of golf as well. The amount of food I ate that trip, I feel like I'm still working off, and we're now into nearly into October.
Well, now you know why we're the heaviest country in the world.
It's I have to remember to order an appetizer and then just eat half of it rather than eating like ordering an
Yes.
appetizer. That's the size of the portions is, I never quite managed to remember like how large they are.
So that leads into the next question is, and I'm very interested on your answer to this because you've been all over the world. Um, what if you could take any restaurant in the world and put it in your own kitchen? What restaurant would that be?
Possible question to answer. I probably got some recency bias. We went to a wonderful steak restaurant on the weekend for my birthday. And I think one of my overwhelming memories of all my trips to the States is the phenomenal steakhouses you have, and
Hmm.
the way that that experience is just nothing like you can really get here. There's one in London that we went to on the Smith and Walensky.
Yes.
I think that's a brand from the US, and they have one here in London, and we went there. It was amazing. So it's probably a bit of recency bias to help me select that. I'm pretty much love every food. Living in Asia, I the sort of Asian cuisine, Thai, Chinese, Singapore, Malaysian, Vietnamese.
Hmm.
I like all of that. There's not much I don't like. Indian food is very, very good. I like Indian food a lot. Um, Huge fan of Indian food. And so I don't know if I could pick a specific restaurant, but I'd probably just about go for a really, really good steakhouse. Would
I
be
don't think you'll get much pushback on that one. I think there'll be a lot of people who agree with you. Couple more, and then we'll wrap up here. Your Mount Rushmore of coaches. Who would you put up? Who are the four that you would put up there? And that's not an easy one to answer in today's world.
no. First one would be Andy Plummer, without any doubt. I think I'd have to put Mac O'Grady up there as well
Mm,
for
yeah.
what he did and how he's laid the foundations for a lot of what's come since his studying of the swing, and people still learning a lot from that even to this day. Um, Two more. It's a hard one for me to really answer in a short space of time. I'm trying to make sure I do it justice because there's a lot of people that have had an influence on my career, and like I hate to not mention
You're
it.
going to leave somebody. Someone's going to call you after they hear this and say,
Yeah,
"Hey, what the hell? I didn't make your list." So maybe I'll let you slide. We'll do two because it's hard to argue against those guys.
thank you. I appreciate that.
And then the last one, and since your career would span, I would imagine the end of one and then most of the other. And who, in your opinion, would be the greatest golfer of all time? Who's the GOAT?
Tiger. Tiger. Yeah, I that's my take. I know that's a question that divides the answer, but and I wouldn't have a problem if someone told me I had to say Jack, but Tiger for me with just the modern game and the quality that he brought to it and the way that he elevated everybody else around him at that time to have to get so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tiger would be my choice.
Yeah, I don't. You're that as I said on all the shows, because that's been asked. Tiger has the edge. I would say 60-40 in that, and it's usually if somebody's 60 or over has gone, as you can imagine, heavily towards Jack, and usually 40 and under heavily to Tiger, and it's that in between, that 40 to 60 range that is kind of split, but leaning more towards Tiger.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in
It's a
that.
fun question.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's one that I think we forget how even having watched Tiger, and I'm glad I got to because there's so many people I meet now, so many younger coaches you talk about, and they didn't really watch him. He was kind of done by the time they got into it. So having watched him, it's easy to forget how good he was. But when those statistics get brought back up and plastered across social media, sometimes it makes you realize how dominant he really was. It was incredible. Yeah, he's an incredible athlete, and glad we got to see him. I wonder if he'll captain a Ryder Cup team in the next
I'm
few
sure
years.
that's going to happen. It is as structured as he was in his developing his craft and everything. I would have to imagine when he gets involved, whatever that is put into place, obviously will hopefully will be very successful for us. But I would think he is going to get involved at the right time that can happen. And I think if it does, and it shows promise, which it most likely will, he will stay there. And hopefully we will get back to that coming down to the last couple of holes for all the matches and everybody's just glued to the TV. And as he's so prone to do, the ratings will just skyrocket.
Yeah. Oh,
It'd
that
be
would
fun
bring
for
the whole.
everybody.
It really would. It really would. Someone was saying yesterday on a pod that, maybe he will do Ireland because of his connection with JP McManus, who owns Adair Manor. So, um, we'll see. We'll see.
What do you have coming up? Do you lecturing anywhere? You got big schools coming up you want to tell everybody about?
Yeah, I've got a couple of trips coming up to the US actually. November trip, going to be in Florida again, teaching with friends, and I'm going to teach with Andy, teaching with my friend Jess Frank. Also going over to Texas to teach with Dennis Sales there in Argyle. That's the November trip. Most of that's pretty much filled up. And then in January, I'll be back for a couple of weeks around the PGA show, teaching again in Florida, going up to Jacksonville as well this time to teach with another friend of mine, a guy called Wes Altis. And there's potential for another school with Dennis and also Mike Manavian. So we're working on some things. So if anybody's interested in seeing what I'm up to, want to come and see us in the States, everything's on the website. My website has like all of the schedule. And doing a little bit of coach training with Hugh Marr, who's one of the leading kind of coach mentors in this country. Who's been around for a long, long time, and he's been kind enough to invite me down to speak to some of their people going through their mentorship and training programs. That's been good as well. And I'll be in Spain in a few weeks for Stack and Tilt Camp, which is a really fun event that we've been running now since its inception in 2017. We take groups to Spain a couple of times a year, and we built this kind of 3-day school, 3-day camp product where golfers get very sophisticated level of exposure to Stack and Tilt, to lessons with Andy, lessons with some great teachers and colleagues of mine, people who deserve a mention: Martin Park, Timo Van Geest, and Billy Irvine. Fantastic teachers. I encourage you to follow them online. We go through the putting, we go through the short game, we go through the driver, and it's a real opportunity for people to kind of expose themselves to great world-class instruction for 3 days. And we do it in an environment where we all stay in the same hotel, and there's a lot of after hours discussion around the dinner table, and it's a great few days. So it's a very cool little setup that if anyone's interested in learning more about Stack and Tilt Camp, you can go on the Stack and Tilt website. There's some details on
Yeah,
there.
we'll have links to all that, and then in the summary, as we always do, to your website and to your social media. Where can people follow you? Go ahead and let them know.
Yeah, please come and see the YouTube channel, Rob Cheney Golf. You can come find me on there, and Instagram, same handle, Rob Cheney Golf, and the website, robcheneygolf.com. So like
Very
Instagram,
simple.
YouTube, and the last one, the website is also, and you can email me as well. So anyway, anything you like. I love responding to comments on the channel. I generally get around to doing that once in a while. I'll see what people have posted, and I'll always follow up and come back around. Not always immediately. There's a few plates spinning most of the time, but I generally get around to it at some point.
Well, Rob, it's been great. I hope some people who had tuned in that were maybe against Stack and Tilt have a different perspective after hearing this. Obviously, those who are Stack and Tilt, maybe they learned something, or maybe talk them into, hey, and check out some other systems and maybe find the similarities, and maybe can avoid some of these heated discussions and at the worst case, you lose a friend over it. So hopefully that has helped for some of those people. But I think continuing to keep this discussion going is very important for us and our students and the game in general, and doing it in a civil manner, and the utmost respect to you guys for putting everything together. And you defend your position, you do it very respectably, and I appreciate that and what you and the guys do, and the girls as well.
Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, if anyone follows up with you and wants to connect, send them my way. I'm more than happy to answer questions that people might have off the back of this, and point them in the direction of a instructor closer to them if they're looking for someone in their neighborhood. Really happy to follow up and keep conversation going, because I think it's healthy to have this out in the open and to see where people stand, and then let everyone make their own mind up at the end of the day.
Awesome. Hang out just 1 minute, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you all next time.